It is the early morning of August 19th, 1862, and a large party of Sioux warriors are gathered in a field west of the U.S. Army post Fort Ridgely. Overnight, the warriors had secretly moved to this position, but upon seeing the fortifications, many of the younger warriors were discouraged. Against the better wishes of Little Crow, it was decided to attack the nearby town of New Ulm. Following the engagement at Lower Sioux Agency, the Dakota warriors of the Minnesota River Valley, the Mdewkanton, had taken several white captives, mostly women and children, but notably one man named George Spencer, who was a clerk in a trading store. Spencer had been protected by one of Little Crow's soldiers named Mdewkanton, or his own Thunder. While Big Eagle wanted to return the white captives, Little Crow decided they would be valuable to the war effort. On August 18th, the Dakota attacked Milford Township, killing 53. A 16-man recruiting party for Civil War volunteers from New Ulm was ambushed near Milford. The 5 survivors returned to New Ulm to warn of a coming attack. The sheriff of New Ulm went to Milford, assuming it was some drunken Sioux, to find the dead, and were fired upon. Upon returning, the sheriff, Charles Roos, called for aid from the governor of Minnesota. Little Crow was urging his warriors to aim their attack at Fort Ridgely, stating that if the soldiers were killed, the settlers will leave, but some of the less disciplined among his soldiers left to attack the town. On August 19th, about 100 Dakota began firing on New Ulm from a bluff near the town, and the settlers returned fire. A coming thunderstorm prompted the young warriors to return to Little Crow's larger group. It was decided to attack Fort Ridgely the next day. Medicine Bottle's forces would distract the white soldiers, while Big Eagle came from the east, and Little Crow and Shakopee came from the west in a pincer movement. The battle would not go as planned, however. When the fighting started and Medicine Bottle's men charged the fort, the Dakota force became disorganized, and the warriors were unable to get into the stone buildings, firing fruitlessly at the windows. The warriors laid siege to Fort Ridgely, and that night were deciding what to do, with Big Eagle arguing they didn't have enough men to take the fort, and Little Crow stating he'll decide what to do later. However, the Mdewkanton and Santee of Upper Sioux Agency arrived at Little Crow's camp to offer their assistance, and the new war council was held. A strict battle plan was made. Little Crow was excited, as all of the Santee Sioux were united, with a force 800 strong. This time, instead of a head-on attack, the warriors snuck as close to the fort as the tall prairie grass would allow, and swarmed in. A shower of arrows set roofs ablaze, and the Santee rushed the stable, trying to take the fort's horses. Warrior Mdewkanton recounted, "I came from the south side and tried to get a horse. As I was leading it out, a shell burst in the stable near me, and the horse sprang over me and got away. American soldiers rushed the stable, and a melee ensued inside, but the Santees fled due to the artillery. Little Crow was wounded, but survived. Mankato led the second assault, but the artillery stopped that too. Big Eagle recounted later, but for the cannon, I think we would have taken the fort." The attack was called off by afternoon, and discussion among the Sioux turned to the approaching soldiers from St. Paul. It was decided to switch the attack to New Ulm, as the soldiers would likely go there first. The Santees attacked New Ulm again in the morning of August 23rd, but the settlers were ready this time, with barricades and militiamen. The Sioux fanned out as they galloped toward the town, yelling to scare the settlers. The settlers were able to slow the Sioux advance, but not stop it. A brutal battle ensued in the streets. Buildings burned, and close quarters combat resulted in around 34 dead among the defenders, and 190 buildings, most of the town, burned. It is unknown how many Dakota died. On August 25th, most of the town of New Ulm's residents were evacuated to the city of Mankato down the Minnesota River. 3 days later, Colonel Henry Sibley arrived at Fort Ridgely. This prompted the Santee to flee up the Minnesota River, camping near Upper Sioux Agency. Little Crow attempted to recruit more Dakota into his war band, but failed due to his failure to take Fort Ridgely. However, by this point the Santee had around 200 prisoners, white women and children, and half natives who were sympathetic to the U.S. Little Crow further lost support of other Sioux bands as marauding Sioux raiders with no cause were murdering settlers, which made Little Crow look bad. Little Crow knew his decision to make war has caused this needless bloodshed, but he also knew it was too late to turn back. Thanks for watching.